It kind of seems like a bit of a military naivety on Collins's part. Collins wasn't a traditionally trained soldier, which I suppose is part of his downfall really. He hadn't taken, while he had helped with the organisation of a lot of ambushes, and that he hadn't taken part in any ambush himself, which in part is kind of his undoing there really, because Emmett Dalton, quite a well-decorated World War I soldier, and that he kind of knew the protocol for ambush situations, and that is to get out of the target zone as quick as possible. And that's exactly what he says he has told the driver to do, to get out as fast as you can. And it's Collins that says that they get out and fight.
100 years ago this month, General Michael Collins was killed in an ambush at Beál na Bláth, not far from his hometown of Clonakilty. As we approach the centenary of the passing of this charismatic and sometimes ruthless revolutionary leader, we're delving into the final journey of the man affectionately known as the Big Fella. I'm Dylan Mangan of the Southern Star, and this is the In the News podcast, The Death of Michael Collins.
Well, I thought I heard a voice calling me. And I jumped up, and at that stage O'Connell had come up the road to me. And he said, "Where's the big fellow?" So I said, "He's round the corner, around the bend." And we both went up there, and he had been shot. He was lying there with a very gaping wound in the back of his head.
So to help us unravel the mystery and circumstances of Collins' demise, we're joined by Jamie Murphy, General Manager of the Michael Collins House Museum in Clonakilty. Jamie, his assassination has been the subject of much speculation and intrigue, with Collins' untimely death continuing to spawn numerous conspiracy theories. But before we get to his death, it's important for us to understand just why the man was such an important figure. So could you tell us who was Michael Collins?
Well, I suppose who Michael Collins is probably one of the most difficult questions that we get. It's the most basic one, but it's the most difficult question that we get. Collins, in basic terms, was a revolutionary figure in the early 20th century, the revolutionary years in Ireland. He was I suppose predominantly a politician. Later would have seen himself as a soldier, and went on to become what I suppose one of the leading figures of the revolutionary years in Ireland as well.
And he was killed during what we kind of refer to now as the Civil War. What caused the Civil War, and what role did Michael Collins have in it kicking off?
So I suppose the Civil War really goes back to the Anglo-Irish Treaty. So after the War of Independence, the Irish government, Dáil Éireann, go and negotiate with the British government at the time, David Lloyd George, Winston Churchill, Lord Birkenhead, and they're the representatives of the British team. For the Irish team, basically, it's chaired by Arthur Griffith. Michael Collins, he's often seen as kind of the leader in the negotiation party, but he was just a kind of an ordinary member of the negotiation party, was led by Arthur Griffith. But along with Arthur Griffith, you have Michael Collins, Robert Barton, and a few others in the delegation who go over for the negotiations. But in the main, a lot of the negotiations fall down onto Arthur Griffith and Michael Collins to carry out.
I did my best, Kitty, but I'm sure my best won't be good enough. We'll have an Irish Free State instead of an Irish Republic. We'll have our own government, but we have to swear allegiance to the English crown. The position of the North will be reviewed, but at the moment remains part of the British Empire. This treaty is just a stepping stone, Kitty. I hope the country sees it as such.
Oh, yeah.
Mick, is this true?
Now, the treaty, I suppose, that they had agreed upon is kind of the source of the Civil War, really. And the treaty that was signed and ratified within the Dáil, it fell short of what we would call here in Michael Collins' house the anti-treaty IRA. So they had opposed the treaty. So that in the Dáil, within the Dáil vote for the treaty, there was nearly a 50-50 split within the Dáil. The treaty was only kind of ratified by about 6 votes. So there was kind of almost 50-50 split in the Dáil. One side, as I say, they wanted to continue on fighting for the full republic. that's what the treaty fell short of. It didn't give them a full republic. From Michael Collins's point of view, the treaty gave them what he called the freedom to achieve freedom. So what it gave them is their own government, their own army, their own police force, and basically got the British Army and the British supported police force out of Ireland as well, and gave them the autonomy basically to make their own decisions within government to a certain extent as well. So Collins seen that as a stepping stone. You often hear the stepping stone argument that he's seen, that take what freedoms that they could then, and then later on they get more. In opposition to that, the anti-treaty IRA, they didn't want to do this. They didn't want to compromise, and they wanted to continue on fighting for the full republic. I suppose what people kind of misunderstand with it is that it's a different opinion. Really, they actually all had the same opinion, and they all wanted a republic. They just had different ways of achieving it.
Do you know, or is there any evidence of whether or not Collins kind of was indecisive as to whether he would be pro or anti-treaty?
No, I think Collins was quite pragmatic in his decisions. When you look at his decisions and how he made his decisions, he kind of did kind of go with the majority, kind of go with the flow of how things were kind of planning and working out. I think he looked at the treaty as the pragmatic choice, as in, like that, it was a stepping stone argument, and I suppose to a certain extent he was proved correct kind of in later years as well, that it did give enough freedom to eventually give the freedom for the 26 counties at least.
408 years after Henry VIII was crowned King of Ireland, Éire cuts its last link with Britain. President Clonakilty, the new state's first leader, joins a dense crowd in Dublin's O'Connell Street as the flag of Éire is hoisted on the GPO building. Here, as the veterans of the 1916 rebellion still recall, was the headquarters of the Sinn Féin rising. And here, 33 years later to the day, the new Éire officially becomes an independent republic.
And then just kind of moving on to his death, like in the build-up to that August, what was the kind of political tensions at the time? Would it be fair to say that Civil War was coming towards an end, or? Yeah,
no, definitely it was kind of, at the time, certainly it was seen to have been that the war was essentially at an end, really. I suppose at that point, just to go back about a month or so, Collins had been, after the treaty was ratified, Collins became the chairman of the provisional government of the Irish Free State. He gave up that role to become the commander-in-chief of the army just shortly after the start of the Civil War. And I suppose what happens in the Civil War initially is that the anti-treaty IRA, they take control of a lot of the major towns and cities throughout Ireland. But very quickly, because of the superior, I suppose, their equipment and kind of numbers and guns and that kind of thing that the Free State have, they quickly take back an awful lot of these cities. One of the last remaining territories is what they call the Munster Republic. So you kind of the major cities of Waterford, Limerick, Cork, and that's kind of the last stronghold of the IRA at the time. And the Free State Army are slowly working their way down the country, and they take back Waterford, they take back Limerick, and Cork is kind of the last stand, really. And about this time 100 years ago, so you're talking about the 8th, the 9th and the 10th of August 1922 is kind of what's called the Battle for Cork. It was kind of one of the bigger battles of the Civil War, and it was kind of conventional warfare as opposed to guerrilla warfare, where you had a large force of Free State troops. They actually make an amphibious landing, so they come in off the sea, and very quickly, because like they bring with them armoured cars, they bring with them 18-pound artillery, and there's 450 soldiers that are landing in Passage West. There's 120 that are landing in Union Hall. So there are large forces that are coming on, and very quickly they take the towns that they're landing in, and then they work their way towards the city. So they're going through the biggest kind of, I suppose, combat areas are Rochestown and Douglas. So they take part on the 9th of August and the 10th of August as well. And there's that's kind of, I suppose, the largest kind of conventional war that takes place during the Civil War. But very quickly, the the anti-treaty IRA, they realise that they're outgunned essentially, and they begin to retreat. In retreating, they kind of blow bridges, and they make it difficult for the Free State forces to actually get to the city. They burn a lot of the barracks and a lot of the military installments and that around the city as well, and then they basically escape west. So you're talking about they're coming down here to Clonakilty, they're coming down into West Cork and out to Macroom area and that as well. By and large, very few of them are arrested, most of them escape as well. So at this point, the conventional stage of the war is finished, and the anti-treaty IRA have escaped kind of into the West Cork, Kerry and Macroom area. That's their last territories, and they revert to guerrilla warfare tactics as well, kind of throughout the country as well. And it's at this point when Collins comes down to West Cork.
And so like West Cork was home for Michael Collins from Clonakilty, and that decision to come down to West Cork, like why do you think he decided, I know you explained why he came down, do you think he was maybe a little bit unaware of the danger that it posed when he was coming down?
I'd say to a certain extent there was he was a little bit overly comfortable because it was his home area. Now, saying that, he had done similar in Limerick. When Limerick was taken back, he had travelled down to Limerick and that as well to carry out inspections and that as well. So it kind of seemed to be what they were doing is when they take back an area, Collins was coming in doing an inspection basically to try and kind of get things settled and that in the area as well. I suppose one of the other reasons it was seen that Collins was coming down as well is because the government at the time were struggling financially, and he was coming down to the different banks and that within Cork City basically to try and retrieve funds that the anti-treaty IRA had taken and kind of deposited in these banks. So he's trying to take them back to help fund the government as well. So, you know, there's a couple of different reasons as well. Obviously, there's another kind of ulterior motive that he possibly was negotiating peace with the anti-treaty IRA. He had met with a man named Florio Donoghue, who was what was known as neutral IRA. He was kind of neither pro-treaty or anti-treaty, and he was kind of seen as a go-between. Each Collins meets him on the morning of August 21st in Macroom. So it's kind of that's a scene that possibly there could have been kind of some negotiations going on there, but by and large I think Collins was just coming down to carry out the inspections and kind of take from there. It was, I suppose, part of his role really as Commander-in-Chief.
Could you talk to us a little bit about his actual final journey? So the convoy set out from Cork on the morning. They went towards Macroom first.
Yeah, so I suppose the route that they took was kind of dictated by a lot of the bridges. As I say, when the anti-treaty retreated, they blew a lot of bridges, and they were felling trees across roads and digging trenches across roads and that to make it difficult for the Free State forces to move around. So they were kind of restricted in where they could go and how they could go. So coming from Cork, they leave the Imperial Hotel in Cork. That's where they stayed the night before. And because all the military installations had been burned in Cork, they turned to local hotels, and that was being used as the main military installation in Cork at the time. That's why he's staying in the Imperial Hotel the night before. They leave the Imperial Hotel first thing in the morning, at first light, and they head across to Macroom, out the Lee Road, and kind of up through Coachford and kind of that back road into Macroom from there. And they have a meeting at the Castle Hotel in Macroom to meet some of the local officers there, and from there they head on to Bandon. Now, again, they're kind of unaware of how to get to Bandon across these unknown roads, and a lot of the convoy weren't from the area either. So they bring a local man with them, a man named Tim Kelleher from Macroom. He hops onto the convoy with them, and he kind of shows them the direction to Macroom. Now, the convoy gets a little bit split up coming up to Beal and Bláth, and they're forced to stop and ask a man for directions, and he tells them in what direction to head on, and they all head off, and the convoy reconvenes up at Newcestown. What they didn't know, I suppose, is the man that they stopped to ask was an anti-treaty scout who had spotted this Free State convoy coming through their territory. There was a meeting taking place in the area of the leadership of the anti-treaty IRA, and they're informed of the convoy, and the decision is taken to set an ambush should they come back on that journey in the same route on the way. Collins continues his inspection of West Cork. He travels into Bandon, carries out, meets with some officers in Bandon, same in Clonakilty, on to Rosscarbery, same in Rosscarbery, and the same in Skibbereen. So he's stopping in all the kind of major towns. He doesn't go any further west in Skibbereen because the Free State officers from Bantry, they come and meet him in Skibbereen. So he doesn't need to go any further west, and the decision is made to return back to Cork. So on the way back, to stop off at Sam's Cross, near his birthplace there at Woodfield, the men of the convoy, they go on into the Four Alls pub. They have, I suppose, 2 rounds of Clonakilty Wrestler as it goes, and on Michael Collins himself. And Collins, he stays with them there for a little while, and then he crosses the road. His grandmother's house is across the road. He meets with a couple of cousins over there, and he meets with his brother Johnny before heading off again. Then travels on through Clonakilty, buys a newspaper on his way through Clonakilty, and heads back to Bandon before leaving Bandon about 7 o'clock in the evening. There he leaves Bandon for the last time.
It was an ideal place for an ambush. It was made for an ambush.
Talking about the ambush itself, obviously no ambush is expected or can be expected.
Yeah.
But was there an inkling among the Free State that Collins might be a target while he was down there?
I think it had been said to him, and even, his brother had said to him supposedly at Sam's Cross, be careful, I think Sean has kind of said that he had told him to get into the armoured car because you don't know what's going to happen. So there was, people were aware of the situation, probably more so than Collins and his convoy, because they were kind of fresh into the area, whereas people had been living in the area and knew kind of the movements of people around and that as well. And so he had been warned to a certain extent, but I suppose it had been an uneventful day. They had been in West Cork all day and had kind of, had faced no opposition whatsoever. So I suppose that they thought they were home and dry really at that stage, and they were very close to being as well. Even the anti-treaty IRA at Beál, Bláth, they were removing the ambush. Most of the men who were there, who had set the ambush, about 50 of them supposedly, lay in wait all day and had decided that Collins wasn't coming back. And most of them had gone. There was a handful of men left that were in the middle of removing a mine from the road and the dray car from the road when Collins's convoy approaches. I suppose the thing with Beál, Bláth as well, people say it's an ambush. It actually wasn't an ambush because the ambush never took place. The ambush was laying in wait, and the convoy never came. The ambushing party had left, and what they came across was a handful of men who were armed who began firing down on them. So it wasn't, I suppose, a traditional ambush as such. So they were just unlucky in that way. If there had to been another half an hour, they probably would have went through unchallenged.
And this was obviously a very bad position. There was no area for retreat. There's only one thing that we could have done was drive on, which I said to the Commander-in-Chief. I said, drive like hell. But he elected to stop here and fight them, you see. So we did.
There's a school of thought, I was watching Emmett Dalton speak about it, that Michael Collins' decision to stop and fight was actually part of his undoing, and he should have driven on. Yeah,
I suppose it kind of seems like a bit of a military naivety on Collins's part. Collins wasn't a traditionally trained soldier, which I suppose is part of his downfall really. He hadn't taken, while he had helped with the organisation of a lot of ambushes and that, he hadn't taken part in any ambush himself. Up until that point, he is kind of on the organisational side of things as opposed to actually taking part in himself, which in part is kind of his undoing there really, because Emmett Dalton, quite a well-decorated World War I soldier, and that he kind of knew the protocol for ambush situations, and that is to get out of the target zone as quick as possible. And that's exactly what he says he has told the driver to do, to get out as fast as you can. And it's Collins that says that they get out and fight them. Now, I suppose they were at an advantage and a disadvantage, that I suppose they're on the roadside, they're being overlooked as well. So they're at a disadvantage at that. Their advantage was, I suppose, that they had an armoured car, they had a Vickers machine gun with them as well. They outnumbered and outgunned the men on the hill really, and I suppose that was the split second decision, that this is only a handful of men firing at us, we get out and attack them, and I suppose that's his downfall there.
He used generally have the rifle thrown down at his feet in the touring car, where he got it up and put it by his shoulders, got it ready. And I said to this soldier, Barry, because tis no wonder he would be getting the rifle ready, because this is a treacherous looking place. Not ever thinking at the meantime that we were going to be ambushed. Yes, we had started firing, but we were actually firing at nothing, we see nothing. But we were firing to where the firing came from, away up on the hills. Although some of the city fellas said to me, who were Dublin lads, that look at the fella, look at the fella, look at the fella. Well, I had fairly good sight at that particular time and I didn't see any fella. In fact, I honestly believe myself that they could have killed us all if they so wished, but I'm sure the one and only man that they were aiming at, or trying to aim at anyway, was General Michael Collins. He was the only man that they wanted to put out the wire, and General Michael Collins stood up and had a gaze around him. He was loading his rifle in the meantime, and whilst he was loading his rifle, one lone shot, apparently like from a sniper, rang out and hit him in the side of the head, the right hand side there, fell down and he never spoke again.
Could you tell me a little bit about who is thought to have actually pulled the trigger? Is there any way of knowing, or is it all conspiracy?
I think realistically there's probably no way of knowing, and I'd say probably the person who did it probably doesn't even know, you know. Now obviously the train of thought that most biographers accept, and is kind of generally accepted now, is that Sonny O'Neill is the man who pulled the trigger. As I say, from our point of view here in kind of carrying out historical research, and that there's evidence for and there's evidence against. So there's nothing really kind of concrete to say definitely that this man said it or this man did it. It's a lot of hearsay. It's a lot of, yes, Sonny O'Neill was at Beal na Bláth. Whether he was actually there during the time of the ambush is not known. It's said that he was, not a sniper, but he was a crack shot. He had been at World War One. He had, was supposedly a good shot. He was also badly injured and kind of walked with a limp and had a bad hand. So, was he capable of it at that point in his life? It's hard to know. And again, it does, I suppose, you have a lot of conspiracy theories about Collins, about who shot him, and all sorts of theories that it could have been somebody from his own convoy, that it could have been, that it wasn't the ambushing party that did it, it was somebody that was passing by from the opposite direction, and all sorts of theories and that come out. Like, realistically, there isn't the evidence to support any of them, and the truth is probably a lot closer to the story that is told, really, that, Collins comes out of cover, travels up the road a small bit while the anti-treaty IRA are retreating. The machine gun jams on the armoured car, giving, I suppose, the ambushing party up on the hill a little bit of a reprieve and the opportunity to fire a couple of shots down onto the roadside. Collins is left in the open at this point and is killed. And I suppose at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the result. That you can kind of find out who killed Collins and, name the soldier who did it. But at the end of the day, the result is the same. And that's Michael Collins died there at Beal na Bláth from a gunshot wound to the head. And he, I suppose, Ireland on that day kind of lost one of their greatest revolutionary heroes at the time.
You say it was a big wound, a bad wound?
It was a very large wound, open wound in the back of the head there. And it was difficult for me to get a first field age bandage to cover it, when I was binding it up. It was all quite obviously to me, with the experience I had, it was a ricochet bullet. It could only have been a ricochet or a dum-dum.
Did he talk to you at any time after he'd been hit?
No.
You felt he was dying?
I felt he was either dying or dead at the time that I reached him. Personally, I was holding the body of the Commander-in-Chief in my arms, and the rest of the cortege was moving ahead as best they could, and it was a sad journey.
Talk to us a little bit about the immediate aftermath of his death, how that was received within Ireland and internationally as well.
Well, I think at that point, like, regardless of I suppose, how he was viewed from the anti-treaty side, that Collins was quite well respected. Even though people kind of opposed his views on the treaty, I think they respected Collins as a man and as a kind of a politician and a soldier that he was. And I think you kind of see that in the days afterwards. There's a huge outpouring of grief throughout the country. I suppose 500,000 people attended his funeral as he lay in state in Dublin over the course of a few days. At the time you're talking about, that's a fifth of the population of Ireland. So there's about 2.5 million people in Ireland, and a fifth of that population is coming to see Collins. So, you know, he was, as I say, a hugely respected character. And within, I suppose, the people who were grieving for him as well, you obviously have the respect coming from the British side of things. Collins had kind of come full circle within the British media and kind of their opinion of Collins as well. Like, you know, 2 years previous, Collins had been known as the leader of a murder gang. These were the headlines that were about Collins. And here we have 2 years later that they're mourning Collins as well. Because I suppose while he was the man who kind of had helped lead this guerrilla war that was kind of that had caused some major atrocities, he was now had one of the key figures in bringing that to an end as well, and kind of bringing about peace as well.
We started our sorrowful journey down the river. There were tears all over the place. I mean, everybody was grief-stricken, including even the members of the crew and the members of the guard that were doing honour to the chieftain. The boat proceeded very slowly down the River Lee, and when we were coming out into the harbour, I was surprised to notice that the British destroyer fleet was in line astern and dressed, their sailors dressed along. And we were greeted with a salute of trumpets, general salute. And this was fantastic over the waves, unbelievable. At any time, music is resounding over a big water space. And as we quietly went further on, they saluted, and then they sounded the last post. And I have that memory with me still. It always will be. It was something that is hard to describe. I was moved, and looking around the harbour, Queenstown Harbour, I noticed that all the windows all around had lights in them, candles or some light of some description, as a sort of a farewell tribute. It was a very emotional time.
So he was kind of seen as like a respected figure. And then obviously from the anti-treaty side, you have kind of the stories from Tom Barry as well. So you have when news kind of hits Kilmainham jail in Dublin, where a lot of the anti-treaty prisoners were being held, that Tom Barry kind of talks about this kind of somber mood that kind of comes down on Kilmainham jail, and the men come out onto the balconies of Kilmainham jail and give a decade of the rosary just in honour of Collins. And these are the men who were opposing him, like, you know, so you can kind of see that, like, you know, that while they had you know, different views, he was still kind of hugely respected by them.
And maybe just to close out, 100 years on, what legacy has Michael Collins left? What is his legacy in Ireland and abroad as well?
Well, I think when we kind of look back at Collins and look at his achievements, the Collins and what he achieved in the space of 4 years is what Ireland for the previous 200 years had been fighting for. They had been fighting for their own government. And Collins had helped achieve that in the space of 4 years. While for many years he kind of was going under the radar, I think now as we're approaching it, Collins' the interest in Collins and that, and knowledge of Collins as well, has kind of grown hugely, and I think we have a much better understanding of who Collins was from a personal point of view and from a kind of a professional point of view, and what he achieved in that as well now than we have ever had.
That's great. Jamie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for talking to me.
Thanks for listening to the Southern Stars in the News podcast. This episode was written and produced by me, Dylan Mangan, and the Southern Stars digital manager, Jack McCarron. make sure to like, share and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Our thanks go to Jamie Murphy of the Michael Collins House Museum in Clonakilty. Clips of John O'Connell and Emmett Dalton used in this production are from the RTE archives, and clips from the film Michael Collins, directed by Neil Jordan, were also used for illustrative purposes. Don't forget to pick up a copy of this week's Southern Star, which includes a special 24-page supplement marking the centenary of the death of Michael Collins. This special anniversary magazine features expert analysis by local and national historians, interviews with Collins family members, and much more, including his life, his loves and his legacy, his final hours in West Cork before his assassination, and the fascination with Collins memorabilia. If you can't make it to the shops, you can subscribe online via southernstar.ie/e-paper. Thanks for listening.